Harry Potter, Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel. Harry had never believed he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still, first year Gryffindor only had a potion with Slytherins, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much. Or at least they didn't until they spotted a notice pinned up in the Gryffindor common room, which made them all groan. Flying lesson would be starting on Thursday, and Gryffindor and Slytherin would be learning together. Typically, said Harry darkly, just what I always wanted, to make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He had been looking forward to learning to fly more than anything else. You don't know you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron, reasonable. Anyway, I know Malfoy always going on about how good he is at Quidditch, but I bet that's all talk. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly and about first year never getting in the house Quidditch team, and told long boastful story which always seemed to end with him narrowly escaping Muggle in helicopter. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Samus Finnegan told it, he had spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about time. He'll almost hit a hang glider on turtley old broom. Everyone from Wizarding family talk about Quidditch constantly. Ron had already had a big argument with Dean Thomas, who shared the dormitory, about football. Ron couldn't see what was exciting about a game with only one ball where no one was allowed to fly. Harry had caught Ron prodding Jean's poster of West Ham football team trying to make a player move. Neville had never been on broomstick in his life because his grandmother had never let him near one. Privately, Harry felt she had a good reason, because Neville managed to have extraordinary number of accidents even with his foot on the ground. Hermione Granger was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of a book. Not that she hadn't tried. At breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all stupid with flying tips she just got out of a library book called Quidditch Through the Age. Neville was hanging on to her every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang on to his broomstick later, but everybody else was very pleased when Hermione's lecture was interrupted by the arrival of the post. Harry hadn't a single letter since Hagrid note, something that Malfoy had been quick to notice. Of course, Malfoy Eagle owls always bring him package of sweet from homes, which he opened gloatingly at the Slytherin table. A barn owl brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed him a glass ball the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. It's a remembrall, he explained. Gran know I forget things. This tell you if there's something you've forgotten to do. Look, you hold it tight like this, and if it turn red... Oh, his face fell because the remembrall had suddenly grown scarlet. You've forgotten something. Neville was trying to remember what he had forgotten when Draco Malfoy, who was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the remembrall out of his hand. Harry and John jumped to their feet. They were half hoping for the reason to fight Malfoy. Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. What's going on? Malfoy got my remembrall, Professor, scowling. Malfoy quickly dropped the remembrall back on the table. Just looking, he said, and he stopped away with a Gravy and Goyle behind him. At 33 that afternoon, Harry, Ron, and the other Gryffindor hurried down on the front step in the ground floor. For their first flying lesson, it was clear, breezy day, grass rippled under their feet, and as they marched down the sloping lawn toward a smooth lawn on the opposite side of the ground to the forbidden forest, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherin were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks lying in neat line on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school broom, saying that some of them started to vibrate if you flew too high, or always flew slightly to the left. Their teacher, Madam Hooch, arrived. She had a short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. "Well, what are you waiting for?" she barked. "Everyone, stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up." Harry glanced at his broomstick. It was old, and some of the twigs stuck out his old odd angel. "Stick out your right hand over your broom," called Madam Hooch at the front, "and say, 'Up! Up!'" Everybody shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione Granger hadn't simply rolled over in the ground, and Neville hadn't moved at all. Perhaps broom, like horses, could tell when you were afraid it, thought Harry. There was a quaver in Neville's voice that only too clearly that he keep his feet on the ground. Madam Hooch then showed them how to mount their broom without sliding off to the end, and walk up and down the rows, correcting your grips. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. "Now, when I blew my whistle, you kick off the ground hard," said Madam Hooch. "Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, and then come straight back down and lean forward slightly. On my whistle, 3, 2. But Neville was nervous and jumpy, frightened of being left on the ground. Pushed off hard before the whistle had touched Madam Hooch's lips. "Come back, boy!" she shouted, but Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle. 12 feet! 20 feet! Harry saw a scared white face look down at the ground, falling away, saw him gasp, slipped sideways off the broom, and wham! A thud and a nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in the heap. His broomstick was still flying, rising higher and higher, and started to drift lazily toward the forbidden forest and out of sight. Madam Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. "Broken wrist," Harry heard her mutter. "Come on, boy, it's all right. Up you get." She turned up to the rest of the class. "None of you is to move. I'll take this boy to the hospital wing. You'll leave those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear." Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madam Hooch, who had her arm around him. No sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst into the laughter. "Did you see his face? The great lump!" The other Slytherin joined in. "Shut it, Malfoy!" snapped Parvati Paddle. "Oh, stick up for Longbottom," said Pansy Parkinson, a hard-faced Slytherin girl. "Never thought you'd like fat little crybabies, Parvati." "Look," said Malfoy, darting forward and snatching something out of the grass. "It's that stupid thing Longbottom Gran sent him." The Remembrall glittering in the sun as he held it up. "Get that here, Malfoy," said Harry quietly. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. "I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to collect. How about up a tree? Give it here," Harry yelled. But Malfoy had leapt onto his broomstick and had taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well. Hovering level with the topmost branch of an oak, he called, "Come and get it, Porter." Harry grabbed his broom. "No!" shouted Hermione Granger. "Madam Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all into trouble." Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding his ears. He mounted up the broom and kicked hard against the ground, and up and up he soared. Air rushed through his hair and robe whipped out behind him. And in a rush of fierce joy, he realized he had found something he could not do without being taught. This was so easy. This was wonderful. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take it even higher, and heard scream and gasp of girls back on the ground, and an admiring whoop from Ron. Harry turned his broomstick. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in mid-air. Malfoy looked stunned. "Give it here," Harry called, "or I'll knock you off that broom." "Oh, yeah?" said Malfoy, trying to sneer but looking worried. Harry knew somehow what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly in both hands and shot it toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about and turned out the room steady. A few people below were clapping. "Now, Graber Goyley up here to save your neck, Malfoy," he recalled. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. "Catch it if you can, then," he shouted, and he threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Harry saw it through slow motion. The ball rise up in the air and then start to fall. He leant forward and pointed his broom handle down. Next second, he was gathering speed in the steep dive, raising the ball. Wind whistled in his ears, mingled with the scream of people watching. He stretched out his hand. A foot from the ground, he caught it, just in time to pull his broom straight. He toppled gently onto the grass with his remembrall clutching safely in his fist. "Harry Potter!" His heart sank faster than he just dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. He got his feet trembling. "Never in all my time at Hogwarts!" Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock, and her glasses flashed furiously. "How dare you? Might have broken your neck." "It wasn't his fault, Professor." "Be quiet, Miss Paddle." "But Malfoy—" "That's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me now." Harry caught sight of Malfoy, grave and goily triumphant as face as he left, walking numbly in Professor McGonagall wake as she strode toward the castle. He was going to be expelled. He just knew it. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sweeping along without even looking at him. He had to jog to keep up. Now he had done it. He hadn't even lasted 2 weeks. He'll be packing his bag in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on the doorstep? Up the front step, up the marble staircase inside, and still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to him. She wrenched open the door and marched along the corridor with Harry trotting miserably behind her. Maybe she was taking him to Dumbledore. He thought of Hagrid, expelled but allowed to stay on the gamekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant. His stomach twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and the other becoming wizard while he stomped around the ground carrying Hagrid's bag. Professor McGonagall stopped outside a classroom. She opened the door and poked her head inside. "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick, could I borrow wood for a moment?" "Wood?" thought Harry, bewildered. Was wood a cane she was going to use on him? But Wood turned out to be a person, a burly 50-years boy who came out of Flitwick classes looking confused. "Follow me, you two," said Professor McGonagall, and they marched in the corridor, Wood looking curiously at Harry. In here, Professor McGonagall pointed into the classroom, which was empty except for Peeve, who was busy writing rude word on the blackboard. "Out, Peeve!" she barked. Peeve threw the chalk into the bin, which clanged loudly. Then he swooped out cursing. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind him and turned to face the two boys. "Potter, this is Oliver Wood. Wood, I found you a seeker." Wood's expression changed from puzzlement to delightment. "Are you serious, Professor?" "Absolutely," said Professor McGonagall crisply. "The boy is a natural. I've never seen anything like it. Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter?" Harry nodded silently. He didn't have a clue what was going on, but he didn't seem to be being expelled, and some of the feeling started coming back to his leg. He caught the thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive. Professor McGonagall told Wood. Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it. Wood was now looking at though all his dream had come true at once. "Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter?" he asked excitedly. Wood, captain of Gryffindor team, Professor McGonagall explained. "He's just built for Seeker too," said Wood, now walking around here and staring at him. "Light speedy. We'll have to get him a decent broomstick, Professor. A Nimbus 2000 or a clean sweep 7 out, say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore and see if we can bend the first-year rule. Heaven know we need a better team than last year. Flattened in that last match by Slytherin. I couldn't look Severus Snape in the face for weeks." Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her class at Harry. "I want to hear your training hard, Porter, or I may change my mind about punishing you." Then she suddenly smiled. "Your father would have been proud," she said. "He was an excellent Quidditch player himself." "You're joking." It was dinner time. Harry had finished telling Ron what had happened. When he left the ground with Professor McGonagall, Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie after halfway to his mouth. He had forgotten all about it. "Seeker," he said, "but the first year never. You must be the youngest house player in about a century." Harry shoveling pie in his mouth. He felt particularly hungry after the excitement of the afternoon. "Wood told me." Ron was amazed, so impressed he just sat and gaped at Harry. "I start training next week," said Harry. "Only don't tell anyone. Would want to keep it a secret." Fred and George Weasley now came in the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. "Well done," said George in a low voice. "Wood told us. We're on the team too. Beaters." "I'll tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure this year," said Fred. "We haven't won since Charlie left, but this year team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry." Wood was almost skipping when he told us. "Anyway, we've got to go." Lee Jordan reckoned he found a new secret passageway out of the school. "But it's that one behind the statue of the Gregory of the Smarby that we found in our first week. See ya." Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy, flanked by Graby and Goyle. "Having a last meal, Porter? When are you getting the train back to Muggle?" "We're back to Muggle." "You're a lot braver now. You're back on the ground, and you've got your little friend with you," said Harry coolly. There was sort of, of course, nothing at all little about Graby and Goyle, but as the high table was full of teachers, neither of them could do more than crack their knuckle and scowl. "I'll take you on any time on my own," said Malfoy. "Tonight, if you want. Wizard duel. Wand only. No contact." "What's the matter? Never heard of wizard duel before, I suppose?" "Of course he has," said Ron, wheeling around. "I'm a second. Who's your?" Malfoy looked at Grabe and Goyle, sizing them. "Grabe," he said. "Midnight, all right. We'll meet you in the trophy room that's always unlocked." When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. "What is a wizard duel?" said Harry. "And what do you mean? You're my second." "Well, a second there to take over if you die," said Ron casually, getting started at last on his cold pie. Catching the look on Harry's faces, he added quickly, "But people only die in proper duel. You know what the real wizard, with the most of you and Malfoy will be able to do, is send spark at each other. Neither of you know enough magic to do any real damage. I bet he's expected to refuse anyway. And what if I had waved my wand and nothing happened? I'd throw it away and punch him on the nose," Ron suggested. "Excuse me," they both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. "Can a person eat in peace in these places?" said Ron. Hermione ignored it and spoke to Harry. "I couldn't overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying." "But you could," Ron muttered, "and you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of the point you'll lose for Gryffindor if you're caught. And you're bound to be. It's really selfish of you, and it's really none of your business," said Harry. "Goodbye," said Ron. All the same, it wasn't what you'd call the perfect end to the day, Harry thought. He lay awake much later listening to Dean and Stephen falling asleep. Neville wasn't back from the hospital wing. Ron had spent all evening giving him advice such as, "If he tried to curse you, you'd better dodge it, because I can't remember how to block them. There was a very good chance if you were get caught by Flinch or Mrs. Norris." And Harry felt he was pushing his luck, breaking another school rule today. On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming out of the darkness. This was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, Ron muttered at last. "We'd better go." They pulled on their dressing gown, picked up their wand, and crept across the tower room, down the spiral staircase and into the Gryffindor common room. A few embers still glowing in the fireplace, turning all the armchair into hunchback shadow. They had almost reached the portrait hole when a voice spoke to the chair nearest them. "I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry." A lamp flickered on. It was Hermione Granger wearing a pink dressing gown and a frown. "You," said Ron fiercely, "go back to bed. I almost told your brother." Hermione snapped. "Percy, he's a perfect. He'll put you a stop to this." Harry couldn't believe anyone would be so interfering. "Come on," he said to Ron. He pushed open the portrait of the fat lady and climbed through the hole. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. She followed Ron through the portrait hole, hissing at them like an angry goose. "Did you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care about yourself? I don't want Slytherin to win the House Cup, and then you'll lose all the point I got from Professor McGonagall for knowing what about switching spell." "Go away. All right, but I warn you. You just remember what I said when you're on the train home tomorrow. You're so..." But what they were, they didn't find out. Hermione had turned to the portrait of the fat lady to get back inside and found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone on the nighttime visit, and Hermione was locked out of Gryffindor Tower. "Now, what am I going to do?" she asked surely. "That's your problem," said Ron. "We've got to go. We're going to be late." They hadn't even reached the end of the corridor when Hermione caught up with them. "I'm coming with you," she said. "You're not. Do you think I'm going to stand out here and wait for Filch to catch me? If he find all three of us, I'll tell him the truth. That I was going to stop you and can back me up." "You've got some nerve," said Ron loudly. "Shut up, both of you," said Harry sharply. "I heard something." It was sort of snuffling. "Mrs. Norris," breathed Ron, squinting through the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris. It was Neville. He was curled up on the floor, fast asleep, but jerked suddenly awake as they crept near. "Thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed." "Keep your voice down, Neville." "The password?" "Pick snout. But it won't help you now. The fat lady gone off somewhere." "How's your arm?" said Harry. "Fine," said Neville, showing them. Madame Pomfrey mended it in about a minute. "Good. Well, look, Neville, we've got to be somewhere. We'll see you later." "Don't leave me," said Neville, scrambling to his feet. "I don't want to stay here alone. The Bloody Baron been past twice already." Ron looked at his watch and then glared fiercely at Hermione and Neville. "If either of you get us caught, I'll never rest until I've learned the curse of Bongi Coral. Bongi's Coral told us about and use it on you." Hermione opened her mouth, perhaps to tell Ron exactly how to use the curse of the Bongies, but Hermione hissed at her to be quiet and beckoned them all forward. The flinted along corridor stripped with bars of moonlight. From the high window, at every turn, Harry expected to run into Mr. Filch or Mrs. Norris, but they were lucky. They sped up a staircase to the third floor and tiptoed toward the trophy room. Malfoy and Crabbe wasn't there yet. The crystal trophy cases glimmered where the moonlight caught them. Cups, shield, plate, and statue winked silver and gold in the darkness. They edged along the wall, keeping their eyes on the door at either end of the room. Harry took out his wand in case Malfoy leapt in and started at once. The minute crept by. "He's late. Maybe he's chickened out," Ron whispered. Then a noise in the next room made them jump. Harry had only raised his wand when they heard someone speak, and it wasn't Malfoy. "Stick around, my sweet. They might be lurking in a corner." It was Filch speaking to Mrs. Norris, horror-struck. Harry waved madly the other three to follow him as quickly as possible. They scurried silently toward the door away from Filch's voice. Neville and Rope had barely whipped around the corner when they heard Filch enter the trophy room. "They're in here somewhere," they heard him mutter. "Probably hiding." "This way," Harry mouthed to the other, and purified, they began to creep down a long gallery full of suit of armor. They could hear Filch getting nearer. Neville suddenly let out a fright and squeak and broke into a run. He tripped, grabbed Ron around their waist, and the pair of them toppled right into the suit of armor. The changing and crashing were enough to wake the whole castle. "Run!" Harry yelled, and the four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see where the Filch was following. They swung around the doorpost and galloped down one corridor, then another. Harry and Lead, without any idea where they were or where they were going, they tripped through a tapestry and found themselves in a hidden passageway hurtled along. Came out near their charmed classroom, which they knew was a mile from the trophy room. I think we've lost him, Harry panted, leaning against the cold wall and whipping his forehead. Nella was bent double, wheezing and spluttering. I told you, Hermione gasped, clutching a stitch in her chest. I told you! We've got to get back to Gryffindor Tower, said Ron, quickly as possible. Malfoy tricked you, Hermione said to Harry. You realize, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Flinch knew someone was going to be in trophy room. Malfoy must have tipped him off. Harry thought she was probably right, but he wasn't going to tell her that. Let's go. It wasn't going that simple. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces, then a doorknob rattled and something more shooting out of a classroom in front of them. It was Peeve. He caught up sight of them and gave a squeal of delight. Shut up, Peeve. Please, you'll get us thrown out. Peeve cackled. Wandering around at midnight, Eagle thirsty. Tut-tut-tut. Naughty, naughty, you'll get caughty. Not if you don't give us away, Peeve. Please. Should tell Flitch I should, said Peeve in a saintly voice, but his eyes glittered wickedly. It's for your own good, you know. Get out of their way, snapped Ron, taking a swipe at Peeve. This is a big mistake. Student out of bed, Peeve bellowed. Student out of bed, down the charmed corridor. Ducking under Peeve, they ran for their life, right to the end of the corridor where they slammed to the door. It was locked. This is it, Ron moaned as they pushed helplessly at the door. We're done for. This is the end. They could hear footsteps. Flitch running as fast as he could toward Peeve shouted, "Oh, move over!" Hermione snarled. She grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock, and whispered, "Alla Harmoro!" The lock clicked and the door swung open. They piled through it and shut it quickly and pressed their ear against it, listening. Which way did they go, Peeve? Flint was saying. Quick, tell me. Say please. Don't mess about, Peeve. Now, where did they go? She ain't say nothing if you don't say please, said Peeve in his annoying sing-song voice. All right, please. Nothing. Ha! I told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please. Ha! And they heard the sound of Peeve wishing away and Flitch cursing in rage. You think the door's locked? Harry whispered. I think we'll be okay. Get off, Neville. For Neville had been tugging on the sleeve of Harry's dressing gown for the last minute. What? Harry turned around and saw quite clearly what. For a moment, he was sure he'd walk in a nightmare. This was too much, on top of everything that had happened so far. They weren't in the room, as he had supposed. They were in the corridor, the forbidden corridor on the third floor, and now they knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into the eyes of a monstrous dog, a dog which filled the whole space between ceiling and floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pair of rolling, mad eyes, 3 noses, twitching and quivering in their direction, 3 dueling mouths, saliva hanging in the slippery rope for the yellowish fang. It was standing quite still, and all 6 eyes started staring at him. And Harry knew that the only reason they weren't really dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise. Harry groped for the doorknob between Flitch and death. He'll take Flitch. They fell backward. Harry slammed the door shut, and they ran. They almost flew back down the corridor. Flitch must have hurried off to look for them somewhere else, because they didn't see him anywhere. They hardly cared. All they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the 7th floor. Where on earth have you all been? She asked, looking at their dressing gown hanging off their shoulder and their flushed, sweaty face. Never mind that. Big snout, big snout, pig snout, pig snout, panted Harry. and the portrait sunk forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trembling into the armchair. It was a while before any of them had said anything. Neville indeed looked as if he never speak again. "What do you think they're doing, keeping a thing like that locked up in the school?" said Ron finally. "If any dog need exercises, that one does." Hermione had got both her feet, both her breath, and her bad temper back again. "You don't use your eyes, any of you, do you?" she snapped. "Didn't you see what it was standing on?" "The floor," Harry suggested. "I wasn't looking at its feet. I was too busy with its head." "No, not the floor. It was standing on the trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something." She stood up, glaring at them. "I hope you're pleased with yourself. We could all have been killed, or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed." Ron stared at her, his mouth open. "No, we don't mind," he said. You'd think we'd drag her along, wouldn't you?" But Hermione had given Harry something else to think about as he climbed back to bed. The dog was guarding something. What had Hagrid said? Gadget was the safest place in the world for something you want to hide, and except perhaps Hogwarts. It looked as though Harry had found out where the grubby little package from Vault 713 was.